Cascadia is fine. It's pretty, it's accessible, it's cheap, it has variety via randomized scoring, and yet I struggle to be passionate about the game. This isn't some misguided ire for simpler games or juvenile derision toward any cardboard bucket lacking an orc or spaceship. It's that for all it does on paper, it doesn't distinguish itself in any of those regards. Each turn, players pick from 4 habitatual hexagons tied to 4 randomized animal tokens on display, then add them to their landmass, affixing the habitat wherever they want, then placing the token on any uncovered habitat that will have them, which will then score points at the end of the game based on the cards drawn during setup for each of the 5 creatures, and further points hailing from the number of hexes in a player's largest connected landmass of each terrain type. Aside from the occasional acquisition of nature tokens by covering habitats that only house one type of creature, which allows players to break the usual tethers in drafting and select any terrain and any creature on display for a turn, that's the game. Players each take 20 turns, refilling any drafted tiles and tokens, count up points, and pack it away. The problem is that it feels completely devoid of tension. Mechanical tension, thematic tension, strategic tension. There's rarely a hard choice tugging on your heartstrings over what tile to grab, or a sense of loss when someone else grabs a combo you wanted. And believe me, I'm a tub-thumping nature lover who normally struggles at passing a dog in the trail without ample pets and rhetorical questioning over who is indeed a good dog. Yet the animals, their habitats, and the accompanying scoring are so divorced from any real-world thematic representation that the rows of assembled elk or foxes homing adjacency can quickly devolve into an array of numbers, colors, and point acquisition, which the same could be said about any number of iconic abstract games, but then it comes back to the fundamental lack of tension. There are almost always a few good options and rarely any consequences. In over 5 years of reviewing games, I've tried to judge titles on their own merits, and in that way, Cascadia more or less succeeds. It has an agreeable nature theme, including some nice representation of my Pacific Northwest homeland. It's a pleasant, albeit borderline passive abstract tile placement game that feels fair and predictable, with a very welcome family mode accommodation that simplifies scoring for younger or more novice gamers. The solo mode is a fine reflection of the multiplayer experience, with an escalating series of challenges that in some ways adds the stakes that the standard game never really had. And the presentation looks great on the table, even if I have some qualms with the surprisingly fuzzy printing on the wood discs, the questionable cheapness of just inverting the relatively few art assets on half the scoring cards, and the sort of thematic incongruity of a rushing river suddenly ending in a field. If I have any true disappointment in the game, it's that theoretically this is exactly the type of game I love, and yet I can barely muster any passion for it. Part of that is my own expectations, wanting a wilderness hike rather than a walk in a neighborhood park, and part of that is a lack of distinguishing characteristics of its own. Ultimately, Cascadia isn't a bad game. It truly is fine, but in my experience, almost subliminally so.